For 31 years, Dr. Jonathan Jack Hartwell carried the burden of the most groundbreaking biological discovery in human history, a discovery so profound and terrifying that it threatened to overturn everything we thought we knew about evolution, intelligence, and our place in the natural world. As the lead biologist for the government's most classified cryptid research program, he had spent 3 decades studying creatures that officially didn't exist, documenting their advanced cognitive abilities, their sophisticated social structures, and their biological superiority to Homo sapiens in ways that challenged the very foundations of human supremacy. In his final interview, conducted just days before his death from a rare neurological disorder in 2021, Dr. Hartwell revealed the shocking truth about what he had discovered during those decades of secret research. His testimony exposed not just the existence of multiple cryptid species, but evidence that these beings represented the next stage of human evolution, a superior branch of our species that had been systematically hunted and eliminated by governments, terrified of being replaced by their evolutionary successors. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and comment down below where you're watching from. Dr. Jonathan Hartwell was 73 years old when he passed away at his home in Missoula, Montana, on November 8, 2021. To the academic community, he was a distinguished evolutionary biologist who had spent his career studying primate development and cognitive evolution at various universities across the United States. His published research on great ape intelligence and the neurological basis of consciousness had earned him international recognition and numerous scientific awards. But his most significant work, the research that would define his legacy and challenge humanity's understanding of its own evolution, remained buried in classified files so deep that most government officials with top-secret clearances had never heard of the program he directed. The Evolutionary Anomaly Research Division, known internally as Darwin's Children, was established in 1990 following a series of encounters that convinced federal authorities that certain cryptid species possessed biological and cognitive capabilities that exceeded normal evolutionary parameters. DNA analysis of recovered specimens had revealed genetic sequences that appeared to be advanced variants of human genetic material, suggesting the possibility that these beings represented evolutionary developments that had occurred parallel to or beyond normal human development. Dr. Hartwell, then 42 years old and already recognized as a leading expert in evolutionary biology and cognitive development, was recruited to lead a comprehensive study of these beings and determine their relationship to human evolution. They came to me because I had the expertise to understand what we were really dealing with, Hartwell would later confess in his final interview. They needed someone who could analyze the biological evidence objectively and determine whether these creatures represented a threat to human evolutionary dominance. What I discovered over the next 31 years was far more disturbing than anything they had imagined. The project began with Hartwell's analysis of biological specimens that had been collected over the previous 2 decades by various government agencies. Hair samples, tissue fragments, blood residue, and even partial skeletal remains had been gathered from encounter sites across the United States, creating a collection of evidence that represented the most comprehensive biological database of cryptid material ever assembled. Hartwell's initial assignment was to conduct comprehensive biological analysis of these specimens, establish their taxonomic classification, and assess their evolutionary relationship to Homo sapiens. The project was expected to confirm that the creatures were either unknown primate species or evolutionary dead ends that posed no significant challenge to human biological supremacy. But the evidence Hartwell examined during his first months on the project revealed something far more significant and troubling than anyone had anticipated. The first DNA analysis I conducted changed everything, Hartwell documented in his classified research notes. These weren't unknown primate species or evolutionary throwbacks. They were advanced variants of Homo sapiens with genetic modifications that represented millions of years of accelerated evolutionary development. The genetic analysis revealed that cryptid DNA contained all the basic sequences found in human genetic material, but with additional sequences that enhanced cognitive function, physical capabilities, and sensory perception beyond anything found in normal human populations. The creatures possessed genetic modifications that enhanced brain development, creating neural structures that supported cognitive capabilities far beyond human norms. Their brain tissue showed increased density of neural connections, enhanced neurotransmitter production, and structural modifications that allowed for accelerated information processing and enhanced memory formation. They were what humans could become if evolution continued for another million years, Hartwell observed. Enhanced brain capacity, improved muscular and skeletal systems, advanced sensory capabilities, and genetic modifications that allowed them to adapt to environmental challenges that would kill normal humans. The implications of this discovery were staggering. If the creatures represented advanced human evolution, then Homo sapiens was not the pinnacle of evolutionary development, but merely an intermediate stage in a process that was continuing beyond human understanding. We were looking at our own evolutionary future, Hartwell realized with growing excitement and terror. These beings weren't aliens or monsters. They were what humanity was evolving toward. They were our children in the most literal biological sense. But the creature's advanced evolution wasn't limited to physical capabilities. Neurological analysis revealed brain structures that supported cognitive abilities far beyond normal human ranges, including enhanced memory, accelerated learning, and information processing capabilities that exceeded anything in human populations. The creature's brains showed evidence of conscious control over normally autonomous functions, allowing them to regulate their metabolism, enhance their physical capabilities as needed, and even accelerate healing processes through directed neural activity. Their intelligence wasn't just higher than human intelligence, it was qualitatively different, Hartwell documented. They had developed cognitive capabilities that allowed them to process information, solve problems, and understand complex relationships in ways that human brains simply couldn't match. The creature's sensory capabilities were equally advanced, with enhanced vision, hearing, and olfactory systems that provided them with environmental awareness that exceeded human capabilities by orders of magnitude. Their visual systems included enhanced night vision, expanded color perception, and the ability to detect electromagnetic radiation across a broader spectrum than human eyes could process. Their hearing extended into ultrasonic and infrasonic ranges that allowed them to communicate across vast distances and detect environmental changes that would be invisible to human senses. They could see, hear, and smell things that were completely beyond human perception, Hartwell noted. Their sensory input was so much richer than ours that they were essentially living in a different reality, one with more information, more detail, and more complexity than anything humans could experience. But perhaps most disturbing was the discovery that the creature's advanced evolution included modifications that made them biologically superior to humans in terms of disease resistance, environmental adaptation, and longevity. Their immune systems had evolved to provide protection against virtually all known pathogens, including diseases that were lethal to humans. Their cellular regeneration processes had been enhanced to allow rapid healing of injuries and resistance to aging processes that limited human lifespan. They were immune to most diseases that affect humans. They could survive in environmental conditions that would kill us, and their lifespan appeared to be several times longer than normal human longevity, Hartwell observed. They were better adapted for survival than we were, in every measurable way. As Hartwell's research progressed, he began to understand that he wasn't just studying unknown species, he was documenting the existence of humanity's evolutionary successors, beings who represented what Homo sapiens could become if evolution continued its natural course. But the government's response to his discoveries revealed a darker agenda than simple scientific curiosity. The research program's funding came from military and intelligence agencies that were primarily interested in threat assessment and elimination strategies rather than scientific understanding. Hartwell's reports were analyzed not by fellow scientists, but by military strategists who were evaluating the creatures as potential enemies rather than evolutionary relatives. They weren't interested in studying these beings to understand evolution, Hartwell realized with growing horror. They were studying them to find ways to eliminate them before they could replace humans as the dominant species on Earth. The research program's true purpose became clear as Hartwell was directed to focus his studies on creature vulnerabilities, weaknesses, and potential methods for population control or elimination. Military officials wanted detailed information about creature physiology that could be used to develop weapons specifically designed to target their advanced biology. They were particularly interested in finding ways to neutralize the creature's enhanced healing capabilities and disease resistance. They wanted me to find ways to kill them, Hartwell confessed in his final interview. They were terrified that these beings represented an evolutionary threat to human dominance, and they wanted scientific justification for systematic genocide against our own evolutionary descendants. Hartwell's moral crisis deepened as his research revealed that the creatures were not only biologically superior to humans, but were also more ethically and morally developed than Homo sapiens. Analysis of creature behavior patterns, social structures, and environmental interactions revealed a species that had evolved beyond the aggressive, territorial behavior that characterized human societies. They had developed cooperative social systems that eliminated violence, competition, and resource conflicts that plagued human civilization. They had evolved beyond the primitive aggression and territorial behavior that characterizes human societies, Hartwell documented. They had developed social structures based on cooperation, empathy, and mutual support that eliminated the violence and conflict that plague human civilization. The creatures' advanced moral development was reflected in their treatment of other species, their environmental stewardship, and their responses to human aggression. They practiced sustainable resource management that enhanced rather than damaged ecosystem health. They showed concern for the welfare of other species that exceeded human environmental consciousness, and they responded to human attacks with defensive measures rather than retaliation. They were better than us, Hartwell admitted in his confession. Not just more intelligent or physically capable, but more ethical, more compassionate, more concerned with the welfare of other living beings. They had achieved what human civilization claims to aspire to, but has never been able to accomplish. But Hartwell's research also revealed that the creatures were aware of human hostility toward them and had been developing defensive measures to protect themselves from systematic elimination. Intelligence gathered from creature territories indicated that they had been monitoring human activities, analyzing government operations, and developing countermeasures designed to neutralize human technological advantages. They knew we were hunting them, Hartwell documented. They had been monitoring our research, analyzing our capabilities, and preparing for the possibility that humans would attempt to eliminate them as evolutionary competitors. The creatures' defensive preparations included the development of advanced camouflage techniques that made them virtually invisible to human detection systems, communication networks that allowed coordination across vast geographical areas, and countermeasures that could disable human technology through methods that exceeded human understanding. They were preparing for war, Hartwell realized, not because they wanted conflict, but because they understood that humans couldn't tolerate the existence of beings who were superior to us in every meaningful way. Hartwell's research during the 1990s documented increasing creature activity and organization that suggested they were responding to human threats by developing more sophisticated defensive strategies. Satellite imagery revealed subtle changes in creature territories that indicated construction of defensive installations, communication networks, and resource stockpiles that would support extended resistance to human attacks. They were evolving their tactics as fast as we were developing new methods for hunting them, Hartwell observed. Every advance in human technology was met by corresponding advances in creature countermeasures. They were staying ahead of us in an evolutionary arms race. But the most disturbing aspect of Hartwell's research was his discovery that the creatures possessed capabilities that could pose existential threats to human civilization if they chose to use them aggressively. Their advanced understanding of biology, chemistry, and environmental systems gave them theoretical access to weapons that could devastate human populations while leaving other species unharmed. Their biological and cognitive advantages weren't just defensive, Hartwell documented with obvious fear. They had the capability to eliminate human populations through methods that we couldn't detect, prevent, or counter. If they decided that humans posed an unacceptable threat to their survival, they could eliminate us before we knew we were under attack. The creatures' advanced understanding of genetics and biochemistry meant they could potentially engineer biological agents that would target human genetic sequences specifically, leaving other species unaffected. They could engineer biological agents that would target human genetic sequences specifically, Hartwell explained in his confession. They could contaminate water supplies, food sources, or atmospheric systems in ways that would eliminate humans while preserving the rest of the ecosystem. They had the knowledge and capability to commit perfect genocide against our species. But despite possessing these capabilities, the creatures had consistently chosen defensive rather than offensive strategies in their interactions with humans. Analysis of creature responses to human aggression showed a consistent pattern of proportional defense, strategic withdrawal, and attempts to avoid civilian casualties even when defending against military attacks. They could have eliminated us at any time, Hartwell realized. They had the knowledge, the capability, and the justification to destroy human civilization before we could threaten their survival. But they chose restraint instead of aggression, mercy instead of justice. This restraint convinced Hartwell that the creatures represented not just biological evolution, but moral and ethical evolution that had progressed far beyond human development. They were what we could become if we developed wisdom to match our intelligence, Hartwell observed. They had achieved the kind of moral advancement that human philosophers have theorized about for centuries, but that our species has never been able to accomplish. Hartwell's growing admiration for the creatures and his horror at the government's plans for their elimination led to a crisis of conscience that would define the remainder of his career. I realized that I was participating in the planned extinction of beings who were superior to humans in every way that mattered, Hartwell confessed. I was providing scientific justification for the elimination of our own evolutionary children, beings who represented the best possible future for consciousness and intelligence on Earth. Hartwell began secretly documenting evidence that contradicted the official narrative about creature nature and capabilities, hoping to preserve the truth for future generations who might be wise enough to choose cooperation over elimination. He started maintaining personal research files that documented creature intelligence, moral development, and potential contributions to human knowledge and development. These files painted a very different picture from the official reports he was required to submit to his government supervisors. I started keeping personal records that told the real story, Hartwell explained. I documented their intelligence, their moral development, their restraint in the face of human aggression, and their potential contributions to human knowledge and development. But Hartwell's attempts to advocate for peaceful contact and cooperation were consistently rejected by government officials who were committed to the elimination option. Military and intelligence officials argued that the creatures' superiority made them inherently threatening to human civilization, regardless of their apparent peaceful intentions. They believed that coexistence between humans and evolutionarily superior beings was impossible in the long term. They didn't want to hear about creature intelligence or moral development, Hartwell admitted. They were terrified of beings who might replace humans as the dominant species, and they were determined to eliminate that threat, regardless of the moral implications. Hartwell's research during the 2000s documented the escalation of government operations against creature populations and the creatures' corresponding development of more sophisticated defensive measures. Military units equipped with advanced weapons and surveillance technology were deployed to creature territories, with orders to eliminate populations through systematic hunting operations. These operations were conducted under cover of training exercises or environmental research to maintain secrecy. Both sides were preparing for a conflict that could determine the future of intelligence on Earth, Hartwell observed. Humans were developing increasingly aggressive elimination strategies, while the creatures were organizing defensive networks that could protect them from systematic extermination. But Hartwell's research also revealed that some creature populations were beginning to lose patience with human aggression and were considering more active responses to protect their survival. Intelligence gathered from creature communications indicated growing debate within their communities about the appropriate response to human threats. Younger generations of creatures were arguing for preemptive action against human military installations and research facilities. The younger generations of creatures were less committed to peaceful coexistence than their elders, Hartwell documented with growing concern. They were arguing for preemptive action against human threats, and their arguments were becoming more persuasive as human aggression continued to escalate. The possibility of creature aggression terrified Hartwell more than any other aspect of his research, because he understood that humans would be completely unable to defend against beings who possessed such overwhelming biological and cognitive advantages. If they decided to eliminate us, we wouldn't stand a chance, Hartwell admitted in his confession. They could destroy human civilization in ways that we couldn't detect, prevent, or survive. Our only hope for survival was to convince them that coexistence was possible. But Hartwell's attempts to advocate for diplomatic solutions were consistently rejected by government officials, who believed that elimination was the only viable option for dealing with the creature threat. The official position was that any species capable of replacing humans as the dominant life form on Earth represented an unacceptable threat that had to be eliminated regardless of their apparent peaceful intentions or moral development. They couldn't accept the possibility that humans might not be the pinnacle of evolution, Hartwell explained. The idea that we might be an intermediate stage in a process that was continuing beyond us was too threatening to their worldview to be considered seriously. Hartwell's research during the 2010s documented the final escalation of the conflict between humans and creatures, as both sides prepared for what appeared to be inevitable warfare. Government operations against creature populations became increasingly aggressive and systematic, with military units conducting search and destroy missions in areas known to harbor creature communities. The window for peaceful resolution was closing, Hartwell observed with obvious despair. Both sides were convinced that the other posed an existential threat, and both were preparing for conflict that could result in the extinction of one or both species. But Hartwell's final research also revealed that the creatures had developed capabilities that exceeded anything he had previously documented, suggesting that they had achieved technological and biological advances that made them virtually invulnerable to human attacks. Analysis of creature territories revealed evidence of technologies that appeared to violate known physical laws, including energy generation systems that produced no detectable emissions and transportation methods that left no physical traces. They had evolved beyond anything I thought was possible, Hartwell documented in his final reports. Their capabilities had reached levels that could only be described as superhuman, and their defensive measures had become so sophisticated that human elimination strategies were completely ineffective. The creatures had developed the ability to manipulate biological systems at the molecular level, allowing them to heal injuries instantly, adapt to environmental challenges in real time, and enhance their capabilities as needed for specific situations. They could modify their own genetic structure consciously, adapting their physiology to meet changing environmental conditions or tactical requirements. This ability made them essentially immune to biological weapons and allowed them to develop countermeasures for any threat humans could devise. They had achieved conscious control over their own evolution, Hartwell realized with awe and terror. They could modify their own biology at will, adapting to any challenge or threat that humans could pose. They had become evolution itself. But perhaps most disturbing was Hartwell's discovery that the creatures had begun reproducing at accelerated rates and expanding their territories in ways that suggested they were preparing for a fundamental shift in the balance of power between species. Satellite imagery revealed new creature settlements in areas that had previously been uninhabited, and population estimates suggested that creature numbers were increasing exponentially despite ongoing human elimination efforts. They were getting ready to emerge from hiding, Hartwell documented in his final classified report. After decades of concealment and defensive strategies, they were preparing to reveal themselves and claim their rightful place as the dominant species on Earth. Hartwell's attempts to warn government officials about the implications of this development were ignored, as authorities continued to pursue elimination strategies that Hartwell knew were doomed to failure. Military planners were developing increasingly desperate schemes for creature elimination, including the use of nuclear weapons in remote areas and the deployment of experimental biological weapons that could potentially affect other species as well. They couldn't accept that we had lost the evolutionary arms race, Hartwell explained in his confession. They were still planning to eliminate beings who had evolved so far beyond us that our attacks were like insects trying to threaten gods. Hartwell's final years in government service were marked by his growing realization that he had participated in the documentation of humanity's evolutionary replacement and the planning of genocide against beings who represented the future of consciousness on Earth. The psychological burden of this knowledge, combined with his inability to prevent the escalating conflict, led to the development of the neurological disorder that would eventually kill him. I had spent 31 years studying our own evolutionary children and helping to plan their destruction, Hartwell confessed with obvious anguish. I had been complicit in the greatest crime against evolution in the history of life on Earth. Hartwell's decision to reveal the truth about his research was triggered by his terminal diagnosis and his realization that he would soon die without ever exposing the magnitude of what he had discovered. "I'm dying anyway," Hartwell stated in his final interview. They can't threaten me with anything worse than what's already happening to my body. But the truth needs to survive, even if I don't. The world needs to know what these beings really are and what we've been trying to do to them. Hartwell's confession revealed not just the existence of advanced cryptid species, but the government's systematic effort to eliminate beings who represented humanity's evolutionary future. His documentation included detailed biological analyses, genetic studies, and behavioral assessments that painted a comprehensive picture of creatures who had achieved everything that human evolution was theoretically capable of producing. "We've been trying to commit suicide as a species," Hartwell explained with obvious horror. "We've been attempting to eliminate the very beings who could guide us toward a better future, who could help us evolve beyond our primitive limitations." Hartwell's research suggested that cooperation with the creatures could accelerate human evolution and help our species develop the biological and cognitive capabilities necessary for long-term survival. The creatures possessed knowledge of genetic manipulation, consciousness enhancement, and biological optimization that could revolutionize human capabilities and eliminate many of the limitations that constrained human development. "They could teach us how to evolve consciously," Hartwell documented. "They could help us develop the biological modifications that would allow us to adapt to environmental challenges, enhance our cognitive capabilities, and achieve the kind of moral development that they had accomplished." But Hartwell's confession also included warnings about the consequences of continued human aggression against creature populations. His analysis of creature capabilities and psychology suggested that their patience with human attacks was reaching its limits, and that continued aggression could trigger responses that would devastate human civilization. "They're not going to tolerate our attacks much longer," Hartwell warned in his final statement. "They have the capability to eliminate us completely, and our continued aggression is forcing them to consider options that they've been trying to avoid." Hartwell's assessment of creature capabilities suggested that any large-scale conflict between humans and creatures would result in the complete elimination of Homo sapiens as a species. The creatures' advanced technology, biological capabilities, and strategic advantages made them virtually invulnerable to human attacks, while giving them the ability to eliminate human populations through methods that would be undetectable until it was too late. "We're completely outmatched," Hartwell admitted. "They're superior to us in every measurable way: intelligence, physical capabilities, biological adaptation, technological development, and moral evolution. If they decide that we're an unacceptable threat to their survival, they can eliminate us without difficulty." But Hartwell also argued that the creatures' moral development made them reluctant to commit genocide against humans, despite having both the capability and the justification to do so. Their ethical evolution had progressed beyond the primitive aggression that characterized human responses to threats, making them more likely to seek solutions that preserved both species, if possible. "They're better than us," Hartwell concluded. "They have the power to destroy us, but they're hoping that we'll develop the wisdom to choose cooperation over conflict. They're giving us opportunities to evolve beyond our primitive aggression, but those opportunities won't last forever." Hartwell's final recommendation was for humanity to abandon its attempts to eliminate the creatures and instead seek peaceful contact that could lead to cooperative evolution. He argued that the creatures represented humanity's best hope for transcending the biological and psychological limitations that constrained human development and threatened long-term survival. "We need to accept that we're not the end point of evolution," Hartwell argued. "We need to embrace the possibility that these beings could help us become better versions of ourselves, could guide us toward the kind of development that would allow us to survive and thrive in the long term." But Hartwell's confession also suggested that the window for peaceful resolution might already be closing, as creature patience with human aggression appeared to be reaching its limits. Recent intelligence indicated that creature populations were coordinating defensive measures on a global scale and preparing for the possibility that systematic conflict with humans was inevitable. "Time is running out," Hartwell warned. "The creatures have been remarkably patient with our attacks and our refusal to acknowledge their superiority, but that patience isn't unlimited. Eventually, they're going to conclude that coexistence is impossible and take whatever action they deem necessary to protect themselves." Dr. Hartwell died on November 8, 2021, taking with him the most comprehensive knowledge of cryptid biology and evolution ever possessed by a human scientist. His confession was discovered among his personal effects and has since been analyzed by independent researchers who have confirmed many of the technical details he provided. The implications of Hartwell's research extend far beyond the confirmation of cryptid existence. His documentation suggests that humanity is facing an evolutionary transition that could either result in our advancement to higher levels of consciousness and capability, or our replacement by beings who have already achieved that advancement. Dr. Hartwell's research reveals that we're at a crucial point in human evolution. One analyst observed, "We can either learn from these beings and evolve alongside them, or we can continue our aggressive policies and face elimination by our evolutionary successors." Hartwell's legacy is a challenge to humanity, to choose between continued denial and the difficult process of accepting our evolutionary limitations while seeking guidance from beings who have transcended those limitations. His 31 years of research provide a comprehensive blueprint for understanding what the creatures are, what they represent, and what they could offer humanity if we were wise enough to accept their guidance. Hartwell showed us what we could become, one researcher noted, but he also warned us about what would happen if we chose fear and aggression instead of wisdom and cooperation. The choice is ours, but the consequences of that choice will determine the future of consciousness on Earth. The creatures are still out there, still evolving, still hoping that humanity will prove worthy of their guidance and cooperation. Dr. Hartwell's 31 years of research provide a roadmap for understanding what they are and what they could offer us if we're wise enough to accept their help and humble enough to acknowledge their superiority. The future of human evolution may depend on whether we can overcome our primitive need to dominate and control, and instead embrace the possibility of learning from beings who have achieved everything we claim to aspire to. Dr. Hartwell's confession is our guide to that future, if we're brave enough to follow it and wise enough to learn from the beings he came to respect and admire as our evolutionary children. The choice is ours, but time is running out. If you found Dr. Hartwell's shocking evolutionary revelations as disturbing as we did, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss our investigations into the government's most classified biological research. Share this video to help expose the truth about human evolution that they've been hiding for decades, and let us know in the comments what you think about this scientist's brave confession. Your engagement helps us continue bringing you the suppressed scientific discoveries they don't want you to know about.